The old Victorian house loomed before them, a skeletal silhouette against the dying light. Joe, ever the pragmatist, checked his equipment, his breath misting in the cold air.
Kevin, more sensitive to the unseen, felt a prickle of unease. The house breathed decay, its windows like vacant eyes.
Stepping through the threshold, dust swirled, thick with the weight of forgotten years. The air hung heavy, stale, and oppressive. Joe planted a boot on the creaking floorboard, a sardonic grin on his face. Home sweet home, Kev.
Kevin, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, ran a hand through his hair. Let's just hope the residents aren't home.
As they ventured deeper, shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, fueled by the whispers of the past.
Joe, ever the skeptic, dismissed the chill that snaked down his spine as a draft. Gotta love these old places, always full of surprises.
Kevin, however, couldn't ignore the low hum that seemed to vibrate from the very walls. You hear that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Joe paused, his flashlight beam dancing across the cobwebs.
Hear what? You're letting your imagination run wild. Narrator, silence.
But even as he spoke, a floorboard groaned above them, the sound heavy and deliberate. The hair on Kevin's arms stood on end.
That didn't sound like any settling I've ever heard. He raised his EVP recorder. Anything you want to say? We're listening.
The only reply was the unsettling silence that seemed to amplify the fear crawling up Kevin's throat. A sudden crash from the floor above shattered the quiet. Joe, adrenaline surging, whipped around, his flashlight beam slicing through the oppressive darkness.
Whatever's up there, it wants to play.
He started up the creaking stairs, each step echoing in the suffocating silence. Kevin, heart pounding, followed close behind. As they reached the landing, a cold wind slammed against them, a guttural growl echoing in their ears. The air turned frigid, biting at their exposed skin. Before them, a swirling mass of shadows coalesced, taking on a vaguely humanoid form. The growl intensified, morphing into a chilling voice that seemed to claw at their sanity.
Leave this place. You are not welcome here.
Joe, momentarily stunned by the apparition, shook his head, fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline-fueled excitement. He raised his camera, the red light blinking. The entity, a vortex of rage and darkness, lunged. The force of it sent Joe crashing into the wall, his camera clattering to the floor. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he scrambled back, his eyes fixed on the malevolent being. Kevin, we mean you no harm. We just want to understand. Kevin, reacting instinctively, threw himself between Joe and the entity, his voice trembling but firm. The entity, its form flickering, seemed to hesitate, its growls laced with confusion. The entity, its form flickering, seemed to hesitate, its growls laced with confusion. It had expected fear, flight. But these two, they stood their ground, their eyes reflecting a strange mix of terror and determination. Joe, we're not here to fight! Joe, clutching his injured arm, scrambled for his camera. Kevin, we just want to understand, Kevin said, his voice surprisingly steady. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. He knew the risks, knew how dangerous this could be, but something in the entity's hesitation gave him a sliver of hope. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic thumping of their hearts. The entity, its form shifting, seemed to be assessing them, its energy palpable, suffocating. The entity, with another guttural growl, dissipated into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. The oppressive air lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. Joe, did we get it? Joe, clutching his injured arm, looked at the spot where the entity had stood, his heart still pounding. Kevin, I think so. Kevin, still shaken, checked his equipment. His voice trembled as he played back the EVP recording. The guttural voice, laced with anger and pain, filled the room. Demon, leave this place! They left the house as dawn broke, the rising sun a stark contrast to the darkness they had encountered. They had entered as skeptics, but they left forever changed. The evidence they carried a chilling testament to the unseen world that existed just beyond our perception. The experience, while terrifying, had ignited a spark in them, a thirst for understanding the unknown that no amount of fear could extinguish. They knew with chilling certainty that their journey had just begun.